The NHL draft weekend has come and gone, and I want to take a look at what really happened over these 2 days. Now, in this video, I'm going to be going over the trades from day 1 and 2, as well as the signings. We're going to start with the trades and signings from the weekend. One thing to note is that the Dobson deal I've already discussed in another video, so I'm not going to touch on that one again. And then after going over the trades and the extensions that we saw, we're going to move on to the draft and discuss some of the teams that I thought did really well and picked up very talented players with multiple picks in the draft. I'll go over some of the winners and losers. So without further ado, let's get straight into the first trade to discuss, which was Charlie Coyle to the Columbus Blue Jackets. Now in this deal, it was Charlie Coyle and Miles Wood for Gavin Brindley, a second and a third. Now I absolutely love this deal for Colorado because Brindley to me is still an excellent prospect. He's definitely undersized at 5'9", but there's just so much skill there. This season he had a down year in the AHL, but he had 53 points in 40 games with Michigan in 2023-2024. And while I think Charlie Coyle is solid, you kind of have to hope he gets back to that 45 to 50 point range, especially for his contract, which has him at $5.25 million for the rest of next season. Now Miles Wood is a decent bottom six forward, but the contract is a little bit concerning at $2.5 million for 4 years. Although with the salary cap going up, I'm not as concerned about that deal, because I think he can be a 20 to 30 point bottom sixer, which for $2.5 million isn't the end of the world. Now, the next trade to discuss was Jordan Spence being traded to the Ottawa Senators for a third and a sixth round pick. Now, this is a deal that I really like for Ottawa. There were some rumors that Spence wanted LA, he wasn't happy with the role he got, and he had somewhat fell out of favor with the coaching staff there. So for Ottawa, they needed another right shot defenseman, and it's a very good bet. His opportunity in LA was pretty small, but in the minutes he got, he put up very exciting numbers. He's an analytical darling, and to only give up a third and a sixth round pick, I think he is a very good pickup for Ottawa. He's still young and has room to progress, and even if he doesn't play anything more than bottom pair, it's still a win in my books. Next up to discuss was the Clifton and a second trade to the Pittsburgh Penguins for Connor Timmins and Isaac Beliveau. Now, this was a cap dump for Buffalo. They recently picked up Michael Kesselring, so someone could have gone from that right side. Now, they bring in Connor Timmins, who probably fills the same similar role to Connor Clifton, although they don't play the game similarly. I think Timmins actually is the better defenseman at this point, and especially considering their contracts. The Penguins, though, they get a second in this deal to add some more draft capital, so it's a win-win trade in my books. I don't really see this as being too far skewed in favor of one team over another. Now, one of the bigger deals from day 2 was John Gibson being traded to the Detroit Red Wings. Now, this is a great deal for Detroit, who finally gets their goaltender. They've been searching for years and years, trying to find someone to fill that role. You look at guys like Cam Talbot, Ville Husso, more recently Petr Mrazek, who they picked up. But Gibson, to me, is the most bona fide starting goaltender of those that they've picked up recently. He had a great bounce-back season with Anaheim getting a .912 save percentage after really putting up disappointing results for the last few years. For Detroit, you also get out from the Petr Mrazek deal, and you only had to give up a second and a fourth round pick to bring in John Gibson. For a team that wants to make the playoffs next season, I think it's a great deal. And for Anaheim, really, this just looks like you held on to Gibson way too long. You didn't get the most value for him, but you're not going to be competing for a Stanley Cup next year, and Mrazek only has a year left on his deal, so it's not terrible value getting a second and a fourth round pick. This also opens up the lane for Lucas Dostal to become the full-time starter in Anaheim, which is certainly a move that has been needed for a couple of seasons now. Next up, moving on to the signings, the first one to discuss is Jack Quinn signing a 2-year, $3.375 million extension with Buffalo. Now, this is a deal I really like for the Sabres. Jack Quinn last season had 39 points in 74 games, and the Sabres really just need players who want to be a part of the long-time solution in Buffalo. I think Quinn still has lots of runway ahead of him, and for Buffalo to get him for 2 more years at $3.375, it gives them time to see what they have in him as a player. And although last season was productive, Quinn didn't take over games and look like he was going to be a surefire start. So I think in this case, doing a bridge deal was the right move. Next up was the ridiculous Trent Frederic extension that's been hinted at for quite some time now. The deal comes in at 8 years, $3.85 million per year, and this is one of the most insane signings that we've seen this offseason and probably will be the most insane one. I'm not a huge fan of this deal. Trent Frederic did not fit in Edmonton all that well, and last season in Boston was definitely a down year for him. Now with the Oilers, this is a gamble on him getting back to that level he was at with Boston before this past season. Frederick was a guy who could score between 30 and 40 points while also being a physical menace on the ice. But for Edmonton, if he doesn't get back to that level and you get the same player that they had in the playoffs this year and down the stretch, I think it's a contract that we could look back on in a couple of years thinking, what the hell were they thinking? Now, next up was the John Tavares extension, which was 4 years, $4.38 million per year. And this is a great deal for Toronto. There's no way around it. It gives them some more flexibility going into the offseason to add offensive depth to that team. Matthew Knies is going to need a big deal. It's been hinted that he could be asking for as much as $10 million per year. So getting John Tavares at a cheap contract for what he provides was an absolute necessity. It's so hard to get a 70-point player for $4 million, even if they are in the latter half of their career. But for the Leafs, it was clear John Tavares was willing to take a hometown discount to stay in Toronto and to be a Maple Leaf, and this contract should help them remain competitive for the next 4 years. Now, the next big deal to discuss was the Sam Bennett $8x8 million extension, and this is one we kinda knew was coming any day now. There's no question about it that he took a big discount to remain in Florida, but again, the Panthers are just such a perfect situation for Bennett that I didn't see him ever leaving. We saw him in the club yelling that he was not heading out of Florida anytime soon, and I think an 8x8 is more than fair. If we look at the regular season production, you could think this is a little bit rich of a contract. However, as everybody knows, as soon as the playoffs roll around, he becomes one of the best players in the entire league, so much so this past season that he actually won the Conn Smythe. So I think this is more than fair for both parties, and it's just another classic Panthers deal that makes the rest of the league very, very jealous. Now, next up was a deal that I didn't really see coming, which was Kevin Ball signing a 6x5.35 million deal, and this is a big bet for Calgary. Now, that being said, Kevin Ball proved this past season that he is more than a capable second-pair defenseman. He's going to bring a lot more defense than offense, but he is a huge defenseman who can move the puck up and down the ice, and he played very well while also munching the third most minutes on the Calgary blue line. The deal is fair. In terms of name recognition, some fans may wonder how Ball got this much, but if you watched the Flames this year, you know he is a solid defenseman and should be a key contributor to the future of that blue line. The final signing to talk about was Joel Hofer getting a 2-year extension with the St. Louis Blues, paying him $3.4 million on both seasons. Now, this is a good deal for the Blues because it protects Hofer from becoming an offer sheet candidate. With a weak goalie market out there, there was a lot of noise that he could potentially receive an offer sheet from a team trying to shore up in the pipes. So for the Blues, you get him signed without having to worry about any other deals that he may sign and head elsewhere. It's a fair contract, I think. $3.4 million probably pays him as a 1B behind Jordan Binnington. That's a solid goaltending tandem, and it has been for the last few seasons. And with a .904 save percentage last year, you can't ask for much more than that if you're Hofer. Now, moving on to the draft, it started with no surprises. Matthew Schaefer was the first overall pick, and he had a very emotional speech about his mother and how much she meant to him. And for the Islanders, this was the best player available. To me, it was the no-brainer pick, and he instantly looks like he could be a captain of the future for that team. Following up, we had Michael Misa as the second overall pick. Again, I thought Misa was far and away the second best prospect, so this one made a ton of sense too. Where the draft really began to open up was at number 3, but the Chicago Blackhawks went with Anton Frundell, and I can't be mad with that pick whatsoever. I think he could end up being an elite goal scorer at the NHL level, and he's someone that can take a little bit of the pressure off of Connor Bedard. Utah was the biggest wild card. There was a lot of speculation that they may end up going for a player like Brady Martin, but they did go for Caleb Desnoyers, and I think that was a very good selection for that organization. Probably the best two-way center in the draft, and one of the best forwards for sure. At number 4, you could easily make the argument that he was the best player available, although I probably would still have said James Haggins. However, he fell a few more spots to number 7 with Boston. But before that, we had the biggest surprise of the first round up to that point, which was Brady Martin going 5th to the Nashville Predators. We knew Brady Martin was going to go higher than many people expected even just a few months ago. There was a ton of talk that he would not be getting past the Bruins at number 7, and it did end up being the Predators taking him 5th overall. And we got a pretty awesome moment showing him watching the draft from the farm in Aurora with his family. At number 6, I thought the Flyers were for sure going to go for a center here. I honestly thought it could be James Haggins or Jake O'Brien, but they ended up going for Porter Martone. Martone is a winger. He's not really a position of need as much as a center is there, but he probably had the most upside of anyone available at this slot, so you can't be too mad at Philly one way or another. As I said, Boston ended up getting James Haggins, and I had him as a top 3 talent in the draft, so to get that at 7th overall was absolutely unreal. There was a lot of speculation that the Islanders would try to move up to be able to bring him in with Matthew Schaefer, but they couldn't end up using those 2 first-round picks from the Canadiens in the Noah Dobson trade to get that done. At number 8, I thought for sure this was where Radim Mertka would end up in Seattle. However, they went for another forward, which is becoming such a common theme and pretty funny, honestly, every year. They keep going for these high-end forward prospects when really they need a defenseman, but that shouldn't take anything away from Jake O'Brien. He is an absolutely unbelievable forward prospect. He's someone that I thought was worthy of a top 10 pick in this draft. However, he was a little outside the top 10 in my mock draft. But either way, he should be a legit top 6 center of the future for Seattle that could put up some awesome points with players like Matty Beniers and Shane Wright. Maybe Berkeley Catton stays at center, maybe he moves to the wing, maybe O'Brien moves to the wing, who knows, but it's a good problem to have if you're Seattle. At number 9, this is where we did see Radim Mertka end up in Buffalo, and I think it's a great pick for the Sabres, who did need to add a right-shot defenseman. Obviously, they recently brought in Michael Kesselring, and on day 2 of the draft, they actually acquired Connor Timmins. So they've been trying to bring in some new blood to that defensive core. But Mertka fits in very well as a tall, rangy defenseman who can move up and down the ice as well. He fits very well with players like Kesselring, Owen Power, and Rasmus Dahlin, and that should be a very solid top 4 of the future, again, if Buffalo is able to keep them, that is. At number 10, probably the biggest wild card of the first round was the Anaheim Ducks taking Roger McQueen. Now, this is a very good spot for McQueen. I had him going 11th in my mock draft, but that was mainly because we didn't know much about his injury. If he's able to play, he's for sure a top 5 talent in the draft. But again, it just comes down to that back injury and how much that scares teams away from selecting him within the top 10. Anaheim seems like a great fit for him, and I think he's going to fit very well with their forward group. At number 11, we had the biggest surprise of the first round up to this point, with Ben Kindle being selected by the Penguins. Now, Kindle is a very good prospect, but he was projected to go in the mid to late 20s. Not someone who was expected to be a lottery pick, but that doesn't take away from the fact that he is very talented. Now, I can't say the same thing for Philly with their next pick because they took Jack Nesbitt after trading up in the draft to get him. Now, Nesbitt is someone that I wasn't super high on as a first-round talent. I thought he would be picked in the first round, but, you know, in the mid-20s, like that 25 to 32 range. But the Flyers clearly see something they love because they traded up to pick number 12 to get him. And I have a hard time believing that he wouldn't have been there in the mid-20s unless another team somehow saw whatever the Flyers see in him. I don't want this to come off like I hate the kid or that he's a terrible prospect. I just see him more as a third-line center. And for using pick number 12 on that, I'm not sure it is the most valuable play. Now at number 13, the most Detroit Red Wings pick ever, they got Carter Bear. Now Bear just screams like a Red Wings pick. He's an absolute hound on the puck, a little bit undersized, but just works so incredibly hard and has offensive talent to go with it. I do like this pick for the Red Wings, and I do think he's going to work out very well in their system. And especially when you look at the 2 players selected in front of him, I think this was a slam dunk. Now at number 14, we had the 3rd defenseman off the board with Jackson Smith going to the Columbus Blue Jackets. Now Jackson Smith is also someone I was very high on. I think this is a good pick for Columbus. He can be a future second pair defenseman. Maybe you shift one of Matejchuk or Werenski over to the right side, or you try Smith on the right side, but I do think there is for sure top 4 upside there. At number 15, we had the Vancouver Canucks taking Braden Coots, and this is right around the area that I expected Coots to go, perhaps a little bit lower, but this was the general consensus range. And he's a guy that does a little bit of everything. I think he's going to fit in well on the Canucks. We'll see what the state of that organization is like in a couple of years, but Coots may be one of the key players on that next wave of talent to take them back into playoff contention. Now at number 16, with the Islanders' 2nd pick of the first round, this was an absolutely unbelievable value pick with them getting Victor Eklund at the 16th position. Now Eklund is someone that I thought for sure would be a top 10 pick in this draft. He had great production this year, and perhaps the only reason he fell this far is because of his size. But that doesn't take away from the fact that he competes extremely hard and plays above his size. He's willing to hit anything, and he's willing to go anywhere on the ice and win a lot of those battles as well. So I think getting this player at the end of the lottery was just such a good value pick for the Islanders. And call me crazy, because they got Kashawn Aitchison at 17, I think I would rather have Victor Eklund and Kashawn Aitchison over James Haggins. Now, neither of them have the ceiling that Haggins has, but they both project as being very solid players. Aitchison, I think, can be a top 4 player of the future for them, and he brings that violence that NHL teams love to have in the playoffs. He's a huge hitter, but he can also score goals and transition the puck up ice. He's really a jack of all trades. For the Islanders, who just a couple of years ago had one of the weaker prospect pools in the NHL, The first round has already boosted them way up into the top half of the league. At number 18, it was the Calgary Flames taking Cole Reshny, and this is another pick I really liked. Reshny has a high offensive ceiling in my mind, and he was someone that went a little bit underappreciated, I thought, with a lot of the draft rankings and a lot of the mock drafts that came out. For Calgary, I think he could play a top 6 role in the future. He's got the offensive potential, and all in all, I just think it is a very solid pick. Now at number 19, one of my favorite players in the draft, the St. Louis Blues went for Justin Carbonneau. Now Carbonneau's got absolutely unbelievable hands, and he can put up some great goal totals as well. For the Blues, I think he's going to be a top 6 member of the future, especially if they try to shift into a little bit younger going forward. We know Jordan Kyrou's name has been out there in trade rumors a little bit, so if they do try to add some more youth with him and Jimmy Snuggerud, as well as players like Robert Thomas at the top of the lineup, I think he could be a very nice addition to that top 6. Now, the most shocking pick overall of the first round was the Columbus Blue Jackets taking a goaltender, and not Joshua Ravensbergen, who was actually projected to be a first rounder, but instead Pyotr Andreanov. Now, Andreanov was a highly touted prospect in terms of goalies in this draft, but he is someone that was projected to go at the end of the second round or perhaps in the third round at the highest. The Blue Jackets took him 20th overall. Now, they must clearly see something they really like, but at this point, it's hard to be in love with this pick as a fan. Now, at number 21, the Nashville Predators took Cam Reed from the OHL, and this is a player I really liked as well. Now, Reed is a little bit undersized, but he has a great offensive skill set. He's someone that looked very similar to a Thomas Harley in their draft here. Obviously doesn't have the same size as Harley, and I wouldn't expect him to be that good at the NHL level, but he is someone that in this range of the draft is a good pick and makes sense. Like, this is right around the area he was projected to go, and the Predators have been great at developing defensemen throughout their history, so perhaps Cam Reed is just the next in a long line of success stories. Now at 22nd, the Penguins took Bill Zonin. This is a pick that shocked me a little bit. Now Zonin's someone that I had towards the end of the first round or early second round, but I don't think it's a bad pick by the Penguins whatsoever. He is someone that I could see being a middle 6 forward of the future. So for Pittsburgh, I'll just say I like this one more than their Ben Kindle pick. However, I'd be lying if I said I was in love with either of their first round selections up to this point, and no spoilers, but that's going to continue a little later. Now at 23rd, the Ottawa Senators selected Logan Hensler, and this is a solid pick. Again, this is right around the area that I thought Hensler would end up going. I had him personally going a lot higher in the draft. I'm very high on him. And for Ottawa, to get him at 23rd overall and get a third round pick by moving down in the draft was great value, especially when you consider that they flipped that third round pick in the Jordan Spence trade. So really, you look at them moving from 21st to 23rd for Jordan Spence and Logan Hensler, it's great value. Hensler's someone that I could see being a second pair right shot defenseman of the future, and while I don't think he's ever going to put up ridiculous offensive numbers, he is a smooth skater and can be good in his own zone, and I think he'll be a solid transitional defenseman. Now at 24th, the Penguins took Will Horkoff, son of Sean Horkoff, and this again is just a little higher than where I had him going in my mock draft. For me, Horkoff was an early second rounder, but the Penguins reached and took him a little bit higher, similar to Zonin. And while I don't hate the pick, again, it just isn't the direction I would have gone with some of the names who were still left on the board. At number 25, it was the Chicago Blackhawks taking Vaclav Nestrasil. Now this is a move I really liked as well because Nestrasil is someone who, although I didn't have projected in the first round, I love his size and aggression that he brings. In terms of playoff hockey, I think he's going to be a very successful player in the future. And at the end of the first round with the Blackhawks, I think it is a risk worth taking considering the young and smaller forwards that they have on their roster. Following him was the Nashville Predators taking Riker Lee, and this is a pick I really liked. Now, Riker Lee grew on me a little bit from my mock draft up until now. I wasn't quite sold on him as a first rounder, but getting to watch him a little bit more and seeing a few more of his highlights, I thought he could be an end of the first round type of prospect. And at 26th overall, that's great value if you're the Predators. We'll see what he can be at the next level. However, at 27th is where the Washington Capitals selected Lyndon Lakovic, and this was a pick that I really liked and surprised it's the Capitals, who always seem to draft extremely well. Now, Lakovic is a really interesting player because he's really tall at 6'4", but he also has some great skill to go with it. If the Capitals are able to unlock that physicality and give him a bit of an edge to play with, turn him into a little bit of a Tom Wilson type, then this is the perfect selection for them to make at this point in the draft. Now at 28, the Winnipeg Jets took Sasha Boumedienne, And this lines up perfectly with my mock draft. This is where I had him going in the draft, and I just think it makes so much sense. As a kid who was already playing Division I hockey this year and really got better as the season went on, I think it's a great upside bet for Winnipeg, and he could one day play on a second pair. At 29th, perhaps the most interesting prospect in the draft, the Chicago Blackhawks took Mason West. Now the reason he's so interesting is because, for one, he's a 6'7" center with great hands, and the second is that he is a highly touted high school quarterback who had Division I offers to play college football instead of hockey. Now, as we know, he committed to hockey long term, and this is the sport that he wants to play. But he has also stated that he's going to play his senior year of high school football and then join the USHL afterwards. It's a very interesting development path for sure, but he is such a raw prospect that if it works out, could be an absolutely unbelievable pick at this stage of the draft, or it could end up looking a little bit like Dean Letourneau, who had a step back this season. Following him, we had the second goaltender of the first round going, and it was the San Jose Sharks selecting Joshua Ravensbergen. Now, this is a pick that didn't really make a ton of sense to me because they already have Yaroslav Askarov. I think Askarov does have the higher ceiling and projects to be a better starter long term, so using a first round selection on a goaltender was a little bit puzzling to me. But that doesn't negate the fact that Joshua Ravensbergen does look like he is going to be a rock-solid starter in the future. Now, does it make a whole lot of sense to have him in San Jose? Not to me, but we'll see if it ends up working out. Now at 31, the LA Kings selected Henry Brustovitz, brother of Hunter Brustovitz, who was taken a couple of years ago. Now this is a good bet by LA as well. I didn't have Brustovitz in my first round, however, I could see the appeal to getting him. He's a right shot defenseman, and he plays in that London Knights system where he's probably going to develop into a star. We saw the same thing with Easton Cowan a couple of years ago. Some of those late first round picks that end up being major pieces of a London Knights team just end up progressing extremely well and looking like steals at that point in the draft. And to wrap up the first round, it was the Calgary Flames selecting Cullen Potter. And this is a great value selection, I think, as well. Potter is someone that I had going in the mid-20s of the draft. And I just think with that skating, you have so much runway to develop a really nice piece of the future. Now, just going on a little bit of a quickfire mode, outside of the first round, there were a few picks that I liked a lot, such as the second pick of the second round for Montreal. They took Alexander Zurovsky, and this is a really high value pick, I think, as well. He put up some great numbers in the Russian Junior League this year, and he looks like a solid offensive forward moving forward. 2 picks later, we saw the Seattle Kraken take Blake Fiddler. And I guess if you are going to miss out on a Radim Murtka and a defenseman that they desperately need, Fiddler is a good consolation prize because he does project as a solid defenseman moving forward. I think he does have the potential to play on a second pair, but I see him more likely as being a 5 or a 6. The next pick, the Washington Capitals surprise, they took Milton Gastrin. Again, a very high value pick, and someone that in a few years, if we look back at re-ranking this draft, he'll probably be even higher. After that, pick number 40 with Philadelphia, they took Jack Murtagh, and this is a lot lower than where I had Murtagh. I had him at the end of the first round. Flyers get him in the second round, good value right there. 2 picks later, the Islanders got Daniil Prokhorov, and this was just an unbelievable draft by the New York Islanders, if I may say. But again, this is another very solid pick. Right after that is Malcolm Spence to the New York Rangers. Again, another great pick. And really the second round had a lot of high talent prospects that did end up getting selected a little bit later. Charlie Serrato at number 49 to Carolina, that's another pick I really like. Moving on to 51 with Boston, William Moore was another rock solid pick, and then San Jose got the other national team development prospect I really enjoyed with Cole McKinney, who went 53rd. After that, we saw another goaltender off the board that was highly touted with Jack Ivankovic going number 58 to Nashville. Nashville is another team that needs a goaltender moving forward. I think Ivankovic is a good bet. I was actually a lot higher on him than a goaltender like Joshua Ravensbergen, and I think he will be rock solid for them in the future. Now, one of the most divisive prospects with Ivan Ryabkin ended up going 62nd to Carolina, and you can tell that there's just a lot of character issues and perhaps work ethic issues with Ryabkin. Analysts were saying that the draft combine did him no favors, that he looked out of shape and maybe didn't look like he had the motor to compete at the NHL. But knowing Carolina got him now, they'll probably just turn him into a superstar forward. He's got the offensive talent, it's just about getting that work ethic and having him play hard every single night. In the third round, I really like Pittsburgh getting Charlie Trethewey 73rd overall. Trethewey is someone I'm a lot higher on, and I actually do think he has some good transitional and defensive abilities as a right shot defenseman moving forward, so we'll see if he is able to put it all together at the next level. After that, it was Cameron Schmidt going 94th to Dallas, And this is just a ridiculously good value pick in my opinion. Schmidt is someone that I saw as a first-round talent, and I did think a team would select him in the first round, so to see him almost fall out of the third round was very shocking. I get that he's only 5'8", but he just has so much offense to his game that I still think he could be a low-end top 6 forward of the future. In the fourth round, we saw the Montreal Canadiens selecting LJ Mooney, and this is just a great pick once again. Mooney, a little bit like Schmidt, is very undersized, but he just has so much offense to his game, and he could be a Cole Caulfield light if he puts it all together. Will he? Who knows? I see him having less offense than Cole Caulfield does, but still, for this position in the draft, you get a player that could potentially be a 50 to 60 point player at the NHL level. Moving on to pick number 181, the Ottawa Senators selected Bruno Edzon, and this is another pick that I really enjoyed. Now, Edzon has some high-end offensive abilities, and he was unbelievable in the USHL this year. Will he ever play a top 6 role in the NHL? I'm not sure, but I could see him being a bottom 6 contributor, and that someone could put up some points at that level as well. And the final player to talk about was the fourth last drafted in the entire draft. At 221st, the Carolina Hurricanes took Philip Ekberg. Now, I was shocked to see him fall this much. Again, I didn't see him as one of the top prospects in the draft, but this is a guy who won U18 tournament MVP for Team Sweden, and to see that almost not be drafted whatsoever was pretty shocking. So that just about does the entire draft weekend recap. Let me know what you guys thought about this video down in the comments, and as always, I'll see you in the next one.